Hi guys, welcome to episode 4. Feedback is proven to be a very effective tool with which coaches can increase the performance and intensity of their teams in both trainings and matches. It can also be used to accelerate the player's learning curve. However, many coaches undervalue the time they should spend thinking about how they want to get their message across to the players. Stay with us as we share with you ideas and practical examples on how a coach can create a better impact with what they have to say. Firstly, one of the problems regarding feedback is overwhelming players with information. Constant feedback will eventually see its effect fade as players start blocking any outside information. The problem that arises from this is that when you want to get across an important piece of information to them, it will probably be ignored or it will be harder to retain because it comes in the middle of so much input that did not add any value to them before. For that reason, it's important that coaches can create spikes during their intervention so that they can grab the attention of players that are already playing football. It's all about making your feedback relevant. This goes hand in hand with another problem, which is scattered feedback. I'm sure that if a coach looks at an exercise, he will find a lot of coaching points to be addressed. It can be, for example, the attack is not using the full width, the defenders are reacting slowly, or the body positioning of a player is not correct, whatever it is. What happens is that if a coach tries to tackle all of these at the same time, not only does the flow of the exercise get lost due to so many interventions, but it also becomes so much more confusing and difficult for the players to retain any information. For this reason, it's very important that the coaches have a very clear idea of what they want to train. Because most exercises nowadays simulate the game, they will be covering aspects of attack, defense, and transition all at the same time. It is then vital that the coach can direct his feedback exactly towards the topic that he wants to work on. For example, if my main goal is to have my players more resistant to high-speed running, then I can get one of those complete exercises, those game-related exercises, and I will develop intensity-related constraints, and I will direct my feedback exactly towards that topic. Let's go to the pitch to see how all of this works. In this example, we set up an exercise 3v3 with goalkeepers. From the structure, it is possible to provide feedback on pretty much every game principle, both in attack and defense. So it becomes easy for the coach to talk about many different things. However, in this specific case, the goal is to have the players do a high number of high-intensity runs to perform with fatigue. To do that, one constraint can be to end the play when a goal is scored or a defender touches the ball. What happens with this constraint is that the attacking team needs to take better, quicker decisions to get to the goal without the opponent interfering. This results in more space covered in attack and more space covered to defend. At the same time, if the play finishes when the defenders touch the ball, I will promote more rotation. If there's more rotation, there's less time to rest. If there's less time to rest, I achieve my goal of performing with fatigue. Because my goal is having high-intensity runs, I can then direct my feedback towards speed, recovery, and motivation. Moving on to another problem related with feedback, it's still common to witness what I like to call the PlayStation feedback. This happens when a coach is telling players what to do, for example, pass here, pass there, cross. Anything that takes away from the player the ability to decide falls into this category. Especially at youth level, this kind of feedback is interfering in the player's development, but not in a good way. One way to get players to decide under pressure and in any context is to lead them into finding the solution for a problem. For example, notice the difference between the feedback, get the ball out of there, and the feedback, where can you find space? One is not telling them anything they don't already know, especially if they're pressed by 2 or 3 players. The other one will force the player to lift his head, look around for space, and take the best decision for him and the team. The hint from the coach will trigger the player's ability to solve problems, and with repetition, the player will then become able to analyze and adapt to any context, with greater benefit for the team in the long term. Because we all know that we learn better by doing than by being told how to do it, let's head again to the pitch to see how all of this works. For example, in this exercise we stimulate a 1v1 situation where the player has to go through 2 gates before scoring in any goal. If my objective is for the attacker to be aware of his surroundings while under pressure, instead of telling him where he has an open gate, I can ask him where he has an open gate. That will force him to look around to see where the gates are and which one is more accessible. Thirdly, to consolidate the coach's feedback, it's very important that the exercises are self-explanatory through its dimensions and constraints. Promoting repetitions of an individual or collective behavior that you want to train is very important. It develops habits and teaches players how to achieve success without the coach having to intervene as much. This frees the coach to direct his feedback towards stimulating the players or addressing more detailed issues like, for example, body positioning. Let me show you what I mean. If part of the attacking strategy of a team is to win the space in the side of the area to then offer a low cross to the box and score, then the coach needs to find an incentive for the players to look for combinations in the flanks. That can be achieved, for example, by defining specific zones that, if conquered, result in 1 point. It is then straightforward that the players will look for those areas without much need for feedback from the coach. By giving them an extra possibility to score in a normal goal, the players will adjust to the context of the game based on their understanding of the situation. Having these self-explanatory exercises will then leave space for the coach to focus on other details like the player's decision making, for example. Last but not least, let me address the coach's positioning. For better quality feedback, it's vital that the coach has as much information as possible about what's happening. However, what happens a lot is having coaches stand in the middle of the exercise, and when asked why, the justification usually is to be able to provide more intensity by being near the players. However, this limits what the coaches can see, because it's impossible for them to know what's happening behind them. So what will happen is that their feedback will be directed to the areas where the ball is. Alternatively, standing on the sideline will give the coach a better perspective over what's happening, and therefore he will be able to provide more value-adding feedback to the players. With this positioning, the coach can also direct his feedback towards areas that are far away from the ball to correct things like, for example, the correct defensive positioning of a fullback who is too open on the pitch. Looking at areas far away from the ball is an undervalued aspect of the coach's intervention. The players, one way or another, know how to behave when they are near the ball. It is, however, when the ball is far away that their ability to understand the game can create a bigger impact in the team's performance. Moving on to the Q&A, I got 2 questions. One of them is about when should I intervene? If you're providing input to your players, there's 2 main times when you should intervene. One of them is when you're analyzing the situation, right before you see something about to happen, then you can provide a hint to the player. For example, if you notice that your player is going to a place where he will face a 1v2 situation and he doesn't have an advantage, then you can provide a hint to him by saying, where can you find space? The other time when you can provide feedback is right after a serious mistake happens. For example, if that player decides to force the 1v2 situation and ends up losing the ball, giving the other team a chance to counterattack, then you should stop in that moment. Because if you don't stop in that moment, the player later, he will not understand exactly or remember exactly the context he was in, and it will end up in a discussion that is not fruitful for you or for the player. If your feedback is towards stimulating the players, then you can provide more ongoing feedback like go, like don't give up, because it doesn't have that much content in it, so it's just an incentive for the player. The second question is about a coach that feels that he's always saying the same thing. There's 2 or 3 ways to look at the situation. One of them is that your team may need more time to understand the processes and what you want them to do. The other way to look at it is that you need to have a really well-defined goal and direct your feedback and be as clear as possible. So if you're training one thing, it may be normal that your feedback is kind of repetitive. The other way to look at this is that if you're trying something but you're not seeing it being done by your players, then maybe you should rethink 1, your message, and 2, the kind of exercise and constraints that you're taking to training. If you think about these three approaches, one of them might work for you in the future. In the next episode, we will cover the topic of set pieces. So comment below which set piece you assign more importance to in your team and why. Until then, don't forget that you can join the ongoing conversation on our WhatsApp group, and for daily content, you can follow me on social media. You have all the links in the description. Thank you for watching.